guys, welcome back to another edition of Chats from the Blog Cabin. Today I'm very honored. I know I say honored a lot, but I'm very honored that Courtney, who actually we've been friends forever, since my youngest daughter, her only daughter, were in kindergarten together, and now they're both graduating and on to bigger and better things. But Courtney is here today to talk about an issue that a lot of people don't talk about, and that's suicide. So, Courtney, why don't you introduce yourself first, and then we can get into your story.
Oh, okay. Hi. Yes. So I obviously live here in Goldsboro, and like Melissa said, we've been friends since they were very little, and now they're adults now. Oh my goodness. But I've lived in North Goldsboro now about, God, I think it's been 15, 16. Well, yeah, probably 15 years. We lived here before we moved, and then we came back. So I've lived here longer than I lived in New York, which is kind of crazy because that's where I'm from. But we were, I guess, North Carolinians now, and really just love North Carolina and happy to answer any questions. I have personal experience, not just with family, but also with friends that have committed suicide. So I'm here to answer any questions and maybe shed some light, not only for people that are dealing with the fallout from being a survivor, but also maybe would help people who are contemplating to understand what happens to those that are left behind.
Yeah, that was the one thing that when I was trying to title this chat, I was like, do I say survivor? Because it sounds like people are trying to attempt suicide and they didn't successfully do it and it didn't go through. Or do I say, so I decided to do it with the loss of the loved one through suicide? Because I figured that was pretty explanatory.
Absolutely.
So you want to tell your story?
Sure. Honestly, it happened, I guess it would be 17 years ago now. My daughter had just celebrated her first birthday. It was the last time I saw my dad, and we had a great time. He came to her birthday party. That was April. And then I got the call on June 30th. And that's a call you don't ever want to get, regardless of how someone passes. But to learn that it was of his own doing was even more traumatic and detrimental. And, we spent the next week or so in Kentucky, which is where he was living at the time, just, figuring out why and trying to, it's tough when there's a backstory with my father and reasons why he did what he did. Lots of, really, it could have been a television show. He had an affair when he was married to my mom and met a girl that was a few years older than myself, and dated her, married her, and unfortunately, patterns die hard. She did the same to him and cheated on him. And I think it was just a case of, at that point, the failures of his life, I think, were just too much to handle. He lost an incredibly esteemed, he was a dean of a college, he was in politics, he lost all of that because of what he had done. So he had moved back home and just never could get that prestigious position back. He could never be, I think, what he was. And then when she left, it was just that catapult. But having to go there and be the daughter, but also try not to be angry at that person, because, they're obviously feeling guilty. Something actually I'm very proud of the way I handled it, because easily I could have flipped the coin and I could have been awful and ugly and blamed it all on her. But at the end of the day, the only person you can blame is the person that chose to take that route. And it was really just a case of, for my own mental health, I had to just focus on, what's next, the next chapter, making sure my grandparents were okay, making sure, they were able to get his belongings and get things tidied up and that type of thing. And that's really just kind of what I focused on right afterwards. And then really it just becomes the healing process, because your whole world's been turned upside down and you're constantly searching for answers. You're constantly asking those questions. What did I miss? Where did this come out of, came out of the blue? This was not something that I ever contemplating my father doing. He was a very strong, I just never, ever anticipated this. So when it happened, you're just kind of that thrown into how, there were some things I look back and say, okay, well, had it been my mom, would I have gone to visit him because of this circumstance, but I had just had a baby and, she was 3 months old. And so, some things happened and I just couldn't make a trip to see him at one point, but I felt guilty because I didn't make that trip. I went and saw him after, but it just was one of those things where you're like, okay, looking back, does he think about that and say, oh, she never came when I was down, or those things you just can't keep doing. Otherwise you'll never move on. Absolutely is kind of the key. Is you just have to really think about the fact that they were in a spot where they thought there was no other way. They really don't. It's a mental health issue, and they don't feel that their life, they feel it's better if they're not there. They just don't realize the ramifications of them not being there, and then what that causes everybody else.
Do you think if the ones that attempt suicide, if they knew what it would cause their family, their loved ones, the turmoil and the mental turmoil of like what I could and couldn't have done, do you think they would think twice about it? Or do you think at this point they're so far gone that there really doesn't factor in?
I guess it depends. It really would depend. I mean, I do think it's not a bad idea. I've always thought of that as part of a treatment, or part of, when they come and speak at schools or do things, that they should have people that have had loved ones that have passed, so they can actually share their stories and share how they're dealing with things afterwards. Because possibly, I think for some people it might, because at the end of the day, people don't realize that somebody loves them. Or don't realize that their life matters if they're not there. So I think showing that, it absolutely does affect other people is huge. You're right, though. There are going to be people that no matter what you say or what they hear, they're so far gone that and mentally that they don't believe anybody is going to be affected. They believe it's going to be better. So it's a fine line, but I don't think there would be any harm, in my opinion, of having those kind of survivor talks and having them be not just survivors talking to other survivors, but actually, like I said, the reality of the fallout and what happens afterwards. I think everybody should listen and hear that, because maybe, like you said, it might down the line affect someone and say, God, I could never do that because, my daughter, or I could never do that because I know how bad this would affect my husband. Something like that, I think would make a huge impact. Absolutely.
Because I know a lot of people, when they're contemplating or even thinking about suicide, they're thinking about the people will be rid of all their problems and they won't have to hear about them, when they don't realize they're just adding more problems onto the pile, basically.
Absolutely. They absolutely are, because it's like I said, it's been 17 years and I still have that guilt. I still have that, oh, could I have done this different? And, oh, why? Or even the question, you still have the question of really why? Why did you choose that route? Why did you decide to, not be present in my daughter's life? Like, was it, why wasn't my daughter, your granddaughter who you loved, you were there for her birth, you were at the hospital, wasn't that enough to save you? So you always have those questions. You always are wanting to know why. And that never goes away. I don't think it ever can go away. It gets easier. It gets better. You learn to accept that they're gone, but it doesn't ever go away.
Does your daughter feel any of the fact that he didn't stick around for her at all?
Yes and no. She's very passionate about suicide prevention, so I know it comes from that. And I know, she actually created an Instagram page when she was in high school that she would share inspirational quotes and to talk about, there is give a voice to the voiceless. Like, we have to talk about mental health. We have to, she really wanted, teens to be talking about mental health, and she put together a benefit. So absolutely, I know she definitely wonders, I don't think she wonders why wasn't I enough, but I think she absolutely hates the fact that he's not here, that he has missed all those milestones. They shouldn't have him for graduation or come take pictures at prom or, things like that. She absolutely is affected by that 100%.
Is there, now I know your mom and him were separated or divorced at the time, but is there like part of guilt in her mind as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my mom was amazing. I mean, she was there at the funeral. She helped my grandparents. I mean, they've been married 20 plus years. She absolutely, because I believe he did call her at one point not long before he did it and kind of apologized, that kind of thing. And they had a good talk, but absolutely, because you don't see the signs, and you don't know that they're signs till you think about it afterwards. But, he never called and gave away his possession. He never called and said goodbye. I mean, nothing. It was completely blindsided. Now, I believe he probably called, his current wife, or I think he called her. But again, there was no communication to me. It was just, boom, it was done. I just got the call from my grandmother, and that was it. So looking back, I'm like, okay, there really weren't any signs for me to notice. But still, I mean, I went far back as, 6 months before, 8 months before, like, God, maybe if I had done this, he would have known how much I cared, or how, so you still think about those things no matter what.
Now if you don't mind, let's talk about when you got the call, how you felt, because I think a lot of people need to know that.
Well, it changes your life. I mean, I remember it was the end of my month I'm in sales. And so we always have this end of month kind of pressure and stress. And I had made my month. So really it was kind of one of those days I wasn't doing anything. I was cleaning my office. I got the call, and I just remember falling to the floor, screaming, trying to reach my husband, which to this day, he's like, I will always answer the phone now. But he didn't answer the phone right away. And I kept calling and calling, and finally, after I don't know how many times, he finally called me back, and he was like, okay, I'm on my way. And we packed up and we were gone. We were living in Maryland at the time, and we just drove straight to Kentucky. But your whole world just falls out from beneath your feet. Everything changes. And then your mind just starts racing, why? Again, I can't emphasize enough that why follows you forever. Why did he do it? Why did I not notice it? That kind of thing. That's absolutely 100%. It just crushes you.
Wow. And you said you've had friends that experienced suicide as well?
Yeah. So my husband's best friend from childhood recently just committed suicide. And it's tough being, that it's someone your own age that you've known since you were a child, that you've been there through all of their trials and tribulations, and you still felt you couldn't help. We saw it coming for years, and it was one of those things. It was kind of like, when are we going to get the call? But no matter how much we tried to help, he actually, one of our closest friends is a pastor, and they had been getting really close, and he had gone to they don't live in, one lived in Michigan, one lived in New York, but he was traveling somehow, and he was able to go to one of his sermons, and, he was changing, and we thought, okay, he found God, he still couldn't fight those demons, so to speak. Still couldn't fight that. And he has 2 little boys. And, again, it's that why, what are you leaving behind? You're leaving behind he was newlywed. You're leaving behind a brand new wife. You're leaving behind an ex-wife. You're leaving behind, 2 children, your parents, your sisters. And it's that fallout of, and I guess the only thing you can think of is because that one was definitely some mental things there, that you can only have the peace that they're at peace. Mm-hmm. But you still, I remember and I have this thing, I don't like to see, once someone's passed, I don't go to the coffin. Mm-hmm. That's just something I couldn't do with my father. I couldn't do with my grandmother, my grandfather. And then we went to this funeral, and I almost didn't even go in the funeral home. But I ended up going in, and it was like the moment I saw his ex-wife, who I'd had a relationship with, when they got married, all that kind of stuff, you crumble. You just hold each other, you scream, you cry. And it's that why, it's that never ending question of, why did you do this? Why did you think we didn't love you? Or why did you think there wasn't another way? And that's why people need to know that there always is another way, and that you can always get help, no matter how helpless you think you are. And if you can't get help from your friends and family, there are so many programs out there that will help you, no strings attached, no judgment. That's what they're trained to do. That's their professional jobs. That's their passion, and that's what they do in their spare time. But get the help. It's better than that why.
I can't even imagine the why. Because honestly, now you're getting emotional just talking about it. And
oh, absolutely.
Your dad, what happened 17 years ago, you said. Mm-hmm.
So absolutely. I still have days I cry. That time where you're like, oh, I can't call my dad. I can't tell him this news. I can't say, hey, we're doing this, or hey, Maddie just, got into college. You can't do those things when they're gone, no matter how much you want to. And I understand people do pass on of other things, and it's just as traumatic. Not trying to take away from that, but when that person chose that, mm-hmm. it's harder. because you get mad, so there's still times I'm angry, there's times I'm guilty, there's times I'm sad, there's times I'm all three, but the anger, you definitely hold on to anger, I think, for a really long time, because again, they made that choice to not be here. They didn't have a disease, or I mean, they might have a mental, but they didn't have something that took them. They took them themselves. And that's what's so hard, is they made that choice. And again, there's things out there for help. And I know nobody wants to talk about it, and it's very taboo, and that's a major problem. There should be no reason to get mental help when you need it, whether it's because you're suicidal, whether it's because you're having crazy thoughts, whether you're paranoid. It doesn't matter. When something is different, something is wrong, there should be no fear of saying, I'm going to go get help. And I noticed it even today with, things that happened in my daughter's school, and that, some people just want to brush it under the rug. They don't want to get their kids help. They see it as I don't know, that they just see that stigma and they choose to ignore it. And you cannot ignore it. You have to just immediately, when you see those signs, or you see if you have any question if that's what they're going to do, you have to ask, you have to get them help, whether they want it or not. You have to fight for it. And that's part of it too, is a lot of times people don't want the help because, whether they're scared, or they're at that point where they don't think they need it, or I've seen so many times where people don't want to bother other people. I've been told that by many people that, well, I didn't want, why didn't you come to me? Well, I didn't want to bother you. I didn't want to pull you into my drama. I didn't want to, I see how a certain situation affected my husband or affected my mom, and it made them so sad. And I didn't want to do that to anyone else. And quite frankly, we have to stop that. Because if we are truly there for each other and we truly have friends, it doesn't matter. What makes you sad makes me sad. And when you're gone, I'm going to be even more sad. So I'd rather, be able to talk to you. I might not have answers, but I can listen, and I can talk, and I can share, and I can find maybe ways to help, whether it's through finding a hotline or finding somebody, if you want it to be anonymous, okay, let's find a group that's completely anonymous. There's so many tools out there that I think we just don't use.
Why do you think it's such a stigma for mental health, though? Because honestly, I think that's the number one thing. And it's Suicide Awareness and Mental Health Month this month. That's why I wanted you on, to bring awareness about it. But why?
Honestly, it goes back a long time. Like my grandparents were doctors in the South, and my uncle was schizophrenic, and they hid that for I don't know how many years. People I don't know if they think of it as a flaw, as a defect. There's something wrong with you. But, I was actually talking to my plumber yesterday. He was fixing something, and we were talking about the effects of COVID and wearing masks and just some things being isolated and all these things that can happen to a person's mental health. And he was talking about somebody new, and she was going to get help. And I'm like, that's fantastic. But he said there is such that, you're scared to ask because there's something wrong with you. But if there's something wrong with your knee, if there's something wrong, you have a cough, you have headaches, you have a heart, palpitations, there's nothing wrong with going to get help for that. So your brain, what is wrong with getting help for your mind? Your mind runs it all. So if your mind isn't 100%, it's not going to run that heart. It's not going to run those knees. It's not going to do what you need it to do. So why not get it checked out? Doesn't matter the littlest things. Go ahead and go talk to someone, because it helps. And I know maybe someone will say, well, financially, I can't. There's ways. There are so many programs out there. You just have to do the research. And it's not a hard thing to do. You plug it into the internet, you look up online a couple different things, and it'll give you all the tools. Or you go to your health department. They will direct you where to go to seek those things that will help you. Absolutely. The suicide prevention hotline, you can call them. They'll give you tools. So it's not that it's a really hard process to find someone that can help you.
Yeah, and plus too, reach out to friends. Even though there's that stigma of being judged by friends, reach out to them, because a lot of friends they're suffering as well, and they're realizing they're not alone. I think that's what's going to make everything, maybe not normalize it, but make it acceptable to talk about.
Absolutely, because so many of us, it's amazing to me when I hear different stories of different friends and different things, and I'm like, I went through that, or I know so-and-so, hey, I know so-and-so who went through that exact same thing. This is what she did, or, everyone's different, but we all have a lot of similar stories. or similar things that happen to us. But like I said, when we shut down and we want to pretend, I call it kind of when you want to have that fake Facebook family, you know, you want to have that where everything is perfect. Hey, sorry, the dogs are about to start barking. Stop it. You focus on that perfection, but you know what? Life is all about the messy bits. It's that was from a movie or something. I remember that, but it's all about what's messy. No one is perfect. No family is perfect. No person is perfect. And it's all those messy parts when you combine them together that make your life great. So you know what? Sometime you might be stuck at home and you don't want to leave the house for 3 weeks. Okay. Well, there's a reason. Let's figure it out. Talk to a friend. You know, is there something, there's anxiety that's bothering you? Are you just, you know, maybe you've gained a little bit of weight and you're scared to go outside. Maybe you just don't want, you know, there's so many different things that could be happening, but that's happened to somebody else. So I think going to your friends and talking about them, and even if they haven't had a similar experience, they're going to talk to you about it and they're going to hopefully walk you through. And even just like you said, that talking, sometimes that's all you need. You know, that's all you need is to say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. Help me not feel this way, or help me accept that it's okay to feel this way, but I can get better. I think you're absolutely right that talking about it will help to get rid of that stigma.
Did you have someone that you talked to when your dad died, when your dad committed suicide?
No, I don't believe, I mean, honestly, just like you said, family, friends, my mom, you know, things like that, my husband. But no, I didn't go see anybody. I didn't, you know, get help or anything like that. Not that I wouldn't, I guess I was okay. Not that I was okay, but I just, you know, this was what he chose. And now I have to move on. And I had a little girl, I had a baby, you know, I had to focus my energy on making sure she was good and she was okay. But I would say probably my outlets would have been, you know, friends that I was close to. Even now when I meet somebody, like I met someone at work or at an event, and we seen each other at every event, and we just, you know, we talk and chit chat, and she hadn't been at a few, and I found out that her husband had committed suicide. Mm-hmm. So at the next event when we were together, we were talking, and honestly, just us, we ended up chit-chatting almost the entire night. I shared, you know, my experiences with it. She shared what had happened. You know, when she left, she said that was the best conversation, that, you know, just being able to talk to somebody who's been through it and share just how I'm feeling, that I'm angry at him and I'm mad because my kids don't have a dad now, you know, and they were going through a divorce. And, you know, she said, so I'm angry, you know, was that a mistake? And, you know, but no, he was an alcoholic. There were all these things that led up. There was a reason that you were separating, and that was okay to be separated. And it was just having those conversations. So I think, honestly, if you don't have anyone to talk to and no one will listen to you, then yes, go see a professional or call a hotline. But like you said, just reaching out, especially when you reach out to people, they might not be your best friends, but when you do it in a way that's non-confrontational and coming from a true, genuine place, it makes a huge difference. Just people hearing stories, just like we're doing today, just hearing these stories and knowing that, you know what, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. You didn't do anything to cause this person to do what they did. And again, knowing that it's going to get better just based on time, but it's not going to go away. I think that's a big, when people will say, oh, you'll feel better. No, I mean, it's a hole in your life. It's never going to be replaced by anything because they were a significant person in your life. It's just going to start to heal. But I think it, like you said, only heals if you talk about it, if you really, really talk about it and get it out there and, you know that it wasn't your fault. There was nothing you could do to help that person.
So how long would you say you still suffer from survivor's guilt a little bit?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, my father had been diagnosed with cancer, and it was one of those things where I had just had the baby and he had had a few treatments. You know, he wasn't as forthcoming about it, so I didn't know about it until I had just had her, and, you know, he was better, but he kind of, you know, it was one of those where in my head, I'm like, if I hadn't had the baby, I would have rushed out and gone to see him. But with having her and being, you know, 12, 15, however far away I was, I didn't rush out. And so kind of my head, I'm always like, you know, I think back, I'm like, if it had been my mom, would I have, you know, because we were super close. And I was like, would I have just rushed and dropped everything? But, you know, I still have to think to myself, you know, we had phone conversations. We talked all the time. He knew I loved him. It was just a circumstance that at that particular moment, I couldn't go. but I went later at another time and he was cancer free. But again, it's just those things you think back, like, God, had I done that, would that have meant more to him? And him thought, it's so hard. It's definitely one of those things that I absolutely have. Something too that comes to mind that I don't know if people realize that when they do things, it's the way they do them or the notes they leave or the lack thereof also have a deep psychological impact on the people they leave behind. That's something huge that I don't think people realize, obviously, because they're not in the right state of mind when they do this. But, 9 times out of 10, when they leave, you search for a note. Everybody wants a note. They want to know why. They want answers. Sometimes they leave that note, and then that note is worse than if they hadn't left a note, So that's something important that people don't realize, that has a tremendous impact. Lack thereof of a note, the note really not helping, or the note saying things that maybe make you feel guilty or make you think, well, okay, you didn't even think about me. You didn't even, like, my father did not mention me or my daughter in his note at all. But in the same breath, it also showed the mental state that he was in, because he talked about cookbooks, making sure that his cookbooks got to his mother, and making sure, that the dogs were, groomed and taken care of. Like, so again, it shows you, that's how I cope with it, and saying, okay, he was clearly not in his right state of mind if his main concern were his precious cookbooks, so, but that has an impact on you. That makes you think, God, did he not even love me, that he couldn't even say, give my love to my daughter, give my love to my granddaughter, so that's tough. Those things are tough too. So sometimes it's those things, that aftermath, or the way that someone does something definitely can have an everlasting impact on you.
Wow. I mean, honestly, that the fact that he didn't even mention you in the note,
it's tough.
Wow. That is,
it's very, very tough. And so it's one of those things that you have to learn to deal with. You have to come up with rationalizations to why that could be. But the answer is, honestly, I have no idea. I'll never know, because you can't ask that question. So yeah.
Wow. Do you think it could be chemical imbalance or medicine, or?
I mean, to be quite honest, he was drunk. So that's a huge factor. He was at one point a sheriff, so he used a gun, which 9 times out of 10, that's the way men, tend to commit suicide, because it's quick, it's easy, and, they want it over and done with. I don't want to say it's more of a cowardly thing, but women are more likely to take pills, slit their wrist. It takes longer. Men they want it over and done with. Women don't like the mess either that a gun would leave. So typically that's the male way to do it. But I definitely think there was mental illness. He was never diagnosed. He was never, but like I said, his brother was schizophrenic. I never saw signs of that, but I saw signs of alcoholism. When I would look back, my mom obviously has told me stories. And so I think the alcoholism definitely didn't help. But I also believe it was utterly failure. I think some people, their egos are very tied to their jobs, very tied to their positions, way they are perceived. And that all fell apart when he had his affair. And I think he never recovered from that. And I honestly think that when he lost her, on top of now, he's lost all this revere, all this position, he lost her. I think that was it. He just didn't see how he could recover, how he can move on from that. And, like I said, he went from being, acting dean of a college to selling Aflac insurance.
Wow.
Which is a 1099 job. It's not, so that it's a huge blow to an ego. Absolutely. So I think that played a huge part in it, 100%.
Wow. I can't even imagine. And to know you and know how strong you are right now, and to have to go, because I've never heard the whole story. I just heard bits and pieces of it. So that's why I was like,
it's like I said, it's something that happened. I can't erase it. I can't change it. So it's just being able to, like I said, I don't mind sharing with anyone who asks, because maybe, like you said, it'll help somebody who is dealing with it themselves, or who maybe is considering, and maybe they realize, like, hey, there's a fallout when this happens. There's absolutely fallout. I was lucky enough that my daughter was only 1, so she doesn't remember. She only knows what I tell her, what I talk about.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a huge difference as well. But when you have, children that are older and that do remember, that's going to be a really lasting effect. And that's the situations where I would really hope that something could stop them, whether it be asking for help or just talking to somebody. But them realizing that, their life matters, whether it's a shitty life right now that they feel, that no matter what, them being gone is not better. It's never better when they're gone.
What would you tell others that are going through this?
Honestly, I would tell you take it day by day. It doesn't ever go away, but it gets easier. It absolutely gets easier with time, especially if you have a good support system. If you have, whether it's friends, family members, children, things that you can bring you joy and that you can focus on. But it's not your fault. I think that's the main thing, is that guilt. There's nothing you could have done. There's no sign you could have seen. There's no words that maybe you heard that if you had done something, it would have changed. When a person actually falls through, there's nothing you can do. Now, obviously, for those that maybe are worried or concerned, if you do see a sign and you do recognize it, whether you think it's the smallest minute chance, don't take it seriously. Absolutely take it seriously. Don't wait. Don't put it off. Don't be that case of, oh, if I had done something different, or if I had actually called and got help, if I had, don't. Absolutely drop whatever you're doing and get them help, because if you don't, anything can happen. So I think that it goes both ways. I think if you're a survivor and, you were dealing with it, know that it will get better, but know that you had no control over it, and that they made this choice, not you. And then in the same breath, if you have somebody you think is contemplating or threatening, or even if it's for attention, sometimes that happens, still address it, because there could be that one time that you don't, and you know what, they follow through on it. So I think it's definitely key to just always make sure that we're talking about it, and that it's okay. I mean, it's there's nothing wrong if you have these thoughts, or you have these fears, or you think you're so unwanted that it'd be better if you were gone. It's just being able to address them and talk about them, and hopefully get help for them.
Yeah, I just honestly cannot even imagine. That's the reason why when I texted you last week and said,
Yeah.
Hey, would you want to come on? You were like, absolutely. I mean, because I was like, for me to actually broach the subject with you, because like I said, I knew part of your story, but not the whole story.
Right.
Like, well, do I ask her? Do I not ask her? And I'm like, well, I'm just going to bite the bullet and ask her anyways. So
we need to do that more often, because I get that all the time when people are talking about it, and Jeremy, my husband, will say something like, oh, well, Courtney's dealt with that. And they'll be like, wait, what? And people think I don't want to talk about her. Or people think it's, oh, I shouldn't say anything, or I shouldn't bring that up, or I don't want to talk about suicide around her. No, because that's the problem. We tiptoe around it. We don't talk about it. I mean, obviously you don't want to be insensitive if it's, something fresh, and watch your words and things like that. But I don't have a problem. And I know there was something like people were having a problem with saying like committed suicide and how that can be. But at the end of the day, they did commit it. They committed that act. So I don't have a problem with saying, your father committed suicide, because yes, he did. He took his own life, and he decided to commit that act. But I think it's the fact that we don't talk about it, or we're scared to say something to someone. And, I always just want to be that open door to anyone, whether it's somebody my daughter's age, whether it's somebody our age. I always want to be that open door, open communication, and that you can absolutely talk to me about it any day, anytime.
Because, honestly, there's a lot of times you see on Facebook, a lot of people say so-and-so died, but they don't mention why they died. And they're like, message me, PM me. I mean, why?
That drives me insane. I honestly, for me, I'd rather you just not post it. That's one of my biggest things. I'm like, you have to bring awareness to something. And if you're not ready to talk about it publicly, then just leave it private. And if you want to talk to certain people privately, I mean, and I know people are private, but again, there's that shame. I think people are ashamed when a loved one passes from suicide. And we can't be, because if we are, then it's going to continually be that coward's route. It's going to be that stigma of like, well, I can't tell anybody I'm thinking about doing this, because, everyone's going to think bad of me. And it's like, well, they can think bad of you now, or they can think of like, oh, he's gone. Like, I'm not going to think about you at all because you're no longer here. So I would rather just burst through that stigma. But I think you're right. I think we need to be open and honest. Even with like drug addiction, I've seen that too, where some people are flat out like, I'm going to tell you why my son passed because I hope it doesn't happen to another person, you know, and then there's others that will gloss over it because they're embarrassed by the addiction. And we have to start having these open conversations about suicide, about addiction, because sometimes they go hand in hand too. But again, when we are so closed-minded and so closed off to mental illness, it's really, really tough. So I think you're right. We need to, as a people, either don't talk about it, or if you're going to talk about it, be upfront and honest of like, hey, this is why he passed. If anyone wants to, you know, talk about this and find out, you know, I'm here to answer your questions. You know, I think, but not everybody's ready to do that. Not everyone's able to. So I understand that. But I think if you are able to and you're wanting to, then you should absolutely have those conversations and not be afraid of it. Because again, you know, I'm not going to be afraid of anyone thinking less of my father or thinking less of my family. It is what it is. It's part of my history. And all I can do is use it as a teachable moment of, hey, you know, I went through this. Don't put yourself through it. You know, I've had friends who have threatened it, and I flat out am like, don't make that threat, because you have young children, or you have a husband, or you have this, and your life matters. I mean, I've had not so nice, I don't want to say not so nice conversations, but those tough, honest conversations, because sometimes you can't sugarcoat everything. Sometimes you can't be all fluffy and, oh, well, the world would be, oh, we can't miss you. No, sometimes you have to say, look, you need to get help for you so that you can be a better family person, or you can be a better friend, or you can be better to yourself. You know, sometimes you have to really fix yourself before you can love anyone else. And sometimes it's those tough conversations of like, hey, look, this isn't okay. You know, you can't leave. You can't leave this world in this way. You need to go get help. You know, whether that's me talking to you, whether that's a professional person, but you need to get help. And so, you know, I've had to have some of those tough conversations with people, and I'm not afraid to, for sure.
You're not. You're
not
one of those people.
Yes,
you're one of those people that you don't, if you don't want to hear the truth, you
right.
don't believe.
Yeah, I have some friends that don't ask me certain questions because they know that I'm going to be honest, but I would rather honestly have an honest answer than do something and it'd be wrong, not wrong, but you know what I mean? Like do something that I'm not comfortable with, or not do something because I don't want to hear like the reality of what could happen if I did do it. And I think that's, you know, sometimes the problem is that we don't want that reality check. And I think we need it sometimes.
So what would you tell, if you could talk to your dad right now, what would you say to him?
Whew. That's a toughie. I mean, obviously I love him, and don't go. You know, there's so much more out there than just the situation. Like the situation you were in was at that moment the most important thing to you, but there was so much more out there after that situation, you know, that we could have done, could have shared. But I think that's the bottom line, is just don't go, you know, stay. That would probably be what I would say.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, that was a toughie. That got me.
Sorry.
You got me on that one.
Sorry, see, I asked you the tough questions this time.
Yes,
okay?
You did. Yeah, I'm fine.
So how has it made your relationship with your mom stronger, obviously? Because they weren't married, but you said that your mom was right there with you through the whole thing.
She was. My mom and I always had a strong relationship, to be honest. But she was a rock. I could go to her, you know, for anything. I mean, she was there. Like I said, she came to the funeral. She was there to handle, you know, anything that maybe I couldn't handle. And then even when after that, I was the only grandchild. I'm the only grandchild. I'm the only child, only grandchild, only niece or nephew. So like, there's nobody else. I don't have direct cousins on both sides of my family. So when my dad passed, he has a brother. His brother's schizophrenic. So he's kind of, you know, I was tasked to be the one that then dealt with all of the family things. So when my grandfather passed, you know, then it was his will going to my grandmother. And then from there, it was, okay, now my grandmother, I'm responsible for her. And there was a time where my uncle, you know, in one of his delusions stepped in, and he was holding her hostage. And so I had to step up, you know, in my 30s and take over conservatorship. I had to go to court. I had to order that she was not fit to drive a car anymore, that she wasn't fit. We had to get him removed from the house. I had to do all that. And so there's some resentment there, during those times, because he should have been doing that. That's his mother. He lived there, he should have been doing those things. So you have that anger. But it makes you put on your big girl britches, and it makes you, do things that are best for your family. But I had to be there to pack up her house when she passed. And, my mom was there to help me do that. And without that, I don't think I could have got through it. She was absolutely there to help me pack everything up, get it labeled, get it shipped here, get it sent to the Salvation Army, whatever we had to do. She was there, whether we were there for a week, 2 weeks, I forget how long, but every step of the way, she was there. And there was no doubt, no question that she would be. So for that, I can't ever be grateful enough. She would always be there no matter what, whether it's, like I said, they were divorced. She still loved him, obviously not a fan of him by any stretch, but still, she was angry at him for what he did to her, but then she was angry for what he did to me, but she never really voiced it. She might make a comment here and there, but she never bashed him. And I think that's super important, because especially with divorce, it's very easy to bash each other. It's very easy to take something that was once a love and make it something so horrible and hideous that you don't recognize that, and it's just nothing but hate. And she really didn't. She really never did that. Like I said, a comment here or there, but rightfully so. But when he passed, there was none of that negativity. It was all just, okay, this is what we got to do. This is how I'm going to help you. Let's do it. And that was huge.
Well, how has that changed the outlook on how you deal with your daughter?
My daughter's my best friend, and my mom was my best friend. So I think that really carried through, that I talk with my daughter. I'm open. I'm frank. She knows what's going on, what happened, and she knows she can come to me with anything. And I'm not going to judge. Her friends know that as well. That's something that I'm always there for someone no matter what. And it doesn't matter, what you've done, what you're going through, what you're planning on doing. I'm going to give you advice, and you can take it or you cannot take it. I honestly lately have been like, God, man, I really probably should have been a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Like, I kind of was like, I definitely probably missed that calling. But no matter what, I'm always here with no judgment. And that's how I parent. I also teach her she needs to be strong. She needs to be independent. You cannot rely, because that's what happens too, especially when you get involved in family dynamics and marriages and things like that. When you come in and you're not independent and you solely rely on sometimes a death like this can just end it all, or a breakup, which is kind of like, with my father, it was a breakup. It was a betrayal. And if you're not equipped to handle the breakups, the betrayals, it's tough. And that's where things like suicide come in, because, it's your whole world. So now your whole world has been, or if you've built your whole world to be around a person and then they leave. So it's not that they just chose to leave, whether it be because you weren't happy anymore or because they made a bad choice or whatever it may be. When that falls apart, you have to love yourself. And so I think that's something I've always taught my daughter is, before you can get into a relationship, love yourself. Love yourself when it comes to your friends, love yourself when it comes to your family, and when it comes to getting married. Because as long as you have that love for yourself, it's going to be a whole lot easier when they don't have that love for you anymore. And it's tough. It's really tough. And some people cannot handle those situations when they are put into them. And whether they lash out through suicide, through suicidal attempts, or, they just change as a person, there's a lot that happens, and it's sad. And I think that's something I just have always taught her, that, make sure you love yourself no matter what. Make sure you're open and honest, always communicate. And if something's bothering you, you have to let people know that. And I think that definitely is helped me with, all that I've dealt with, is to make sure that, it's okay. No matter what is wrong, it's okay. And we're going to get through it. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, obviously reach out to people. That should be the number one thing, instead of holding it all in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Whether if you don't want to talk about it with me or your father, you call one of your friends, send a message, whatever, go to coffee, but also same thing. I would always tell her with signs with her friends, hey, if you see something that's not right, talk to them, make sure they're okay. If you feel like it's getting out of control, come to us, come to their parent, whatever you have to do, but don't let it go away, because if you ignore it, that's when something bad can happen.
And then there's that guilt for her or for their friends saying,
absolutely,
wow, looking back, these were signs and we didn't do anything about it.
And we didn't do anything about it. Oh, absolutely. And that's 100% where that guilt comes in. Absolutely.
Wow. Courtney, is there anything else you would like to share?
No, I mean, I think you heard my story. I don't know. I just, like I said, I think it's just so important that we talk about this. And it's so important that people know that they're not alone and that it's okay. It's okay if you have these thoughts. It's okay if you have depression. It's okay if you have anxiety. All of those things are okay. It's part of life, and it's okay to get help. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that we're not okay with getting help. And that's why we have such a problem right now.
Yeah, that is true. Courtney, I want to thank you for sharing your story.
Sure.
And I'm sorry I made you cry. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's okay.
I was like, honestly, I don't think I've ever seen you really break down and cry. So
I do. But it's probably more for movies. I'm very emotional when it comes to like watching movies.
Oh, so am I. My girls sit there and laugh at me.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, it hasn't been a good movie if Courtney hasn't cried. It's pretty much what we say.
And guys, I have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline running on the bottom. It's 1-800-273-8255. You can actually reach out to them, or you can even go online and live chat with somebody.
Yep.
So there's always that option, or reach out to a friend, because you don't want to leave people behind wondering what if.
Exactly.
Why didn't I see the signs? What if I had done this? What if I had done that?
Absolutely. It's the why and the what if 100% is what we're left with. And it's not, and to be honest, it's not fair. But it's not fair. I mean, you are going through something, and I'm not trying to diminish what you're going through, but then what you cause others to go through. I know you think in your mind, everything's going to be perfect. I'm going to be gone. Everything's going to be great. But that's not the case. There's a mother, there's a brother, there's a sister, there's a child, there's a friend that you have completely wrecked and completely destroyed. And some people can't come back from it. Some people can, and some people can't. So again, it's one of those things, you have to think about the fallout. You have to think about what else is in your world that will be affected by it. Because as much as you want to think that it's not going to have an effect, it 100% does.
Yeah, it's true. And Courtney, once again, thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
And guys, we will see you on the next chat from the Blog Cabin.
Bye.
Bye.